So Mike, you've made over $5 million and printing out your stats, I think we ran out of ink. So you're a phenomenal player. You really can't do too much better. Talking to you about reading betting patterns.
Right.
What do these guys need to look for? This is advanced level, but I mean, you're perfect for this. So
Right.
what can these guys do?
Well, it's trying to use the information that your opponents are giving you to help you beat them. And one of the ways you can do that is by reading their betting patterns to try and figure out what type of hand that they have. And you just want to be really good at picking up every piece of information that they give you from every hand that they play. Some people only pay attention when they're in a hand. If you're paying attention when you're not in a hand, instead of watching TV or looking at your iPad or whatever, you can watch the way that they play every hand, and you should be able to pick up some useful things that you can use. Do they only c-bet when they have the nuts or nothing, or do they c-bet when they have top pair? Are they check calling when they have a middle pair, or are they betting when they have a middle pair? All those types of things can help you so that you can play your hands against them knowing what they have. Because if you know what your opponent has, it's very easy to minimize the damage when you're beat and to maximize your value when you have the better hand, or to get them to fold the better hand so you can win the pot. All those things you can do by being able to read your opponent by the way that they're betting. People make mistakes by betting too much when they're on a draw, or betting too little when they have the nuts, or betting too little when they're trying to use like a blocking bet to try and help themselves chase their draw or get to the river without putting a lot of chips in. All those types of things are things that people do in terms of their betting patterns.
So I may take this down a notch
Right.
to beginner or intermediate by accident, but it sounded like you really want to look for things long term with these players, and maybe some regular players if you play online or whichever it is.
Right.
And develop these patterns. It might be a long session. And then there's, of course, just that given hand. There's little details that you can do.
Right.
So with all that in there, are you taking notes on these guys as you play? Is this stuff that...
The more detailed notes you take, whether you're playing online or whether you're playing with someone live, they're definitely going to help you. Myself personally, when I'm playing online, it's very easy because you just hit the note thing and you can put in, okay, this person played this hand this way. When you're playing live, I tend to use my memory a little bit more, but it would probably be helpful if I wrote down some things because you're definitely going to play with some players again. But for the most part, it's really just paying attention to that session or to that game and just watching how someone's playing. And it's going to help you be able to put them on a hand, which we'll talk about a little bit later.
Mike, I struggle a little bit in my mind because I'm not sure how we're going to make this a whole lot different from our previous lesson
Right.
of reading betting patterns and now moving into putting players on a hand.
Right. Well, they kind of feed together. You're trying to read betting patterns so that you can figure out what your player has. There's a few other things you can do, to try and put players on a hand, or really how I prefer to phrase it is, I guess, putting them on a hand range, because you may not always be able to guess their exact cards, but their range of cards is really what you're looking for. And right from the second that a hand starts, I'm always trying to narrow the range of what someone has. So to give you a quick example, player B, or player A raises from second position, under the gun +1, okay, in the early stages of a tournament, and I'm in middle position and I have pocket 8s, let's say. Okay, so right from the second that they raise, I'm trying to identify what type of hand could they have. It's the early stages of the tournament. There's no antes. I don't have a lot of information on this player, but I'm going to guess they have a premium hand if they're raising from early position. So they should have ace king, ace queen, or any pocket pair. So that's my beginning range that I assign them. Okay, I call their raise with pocket 8s. We go heads up to a flop, and the flop comes ace 6-3 rainbow, and they bet. Okay, so again, now I'm trying to identify their hand or their hand range. Now, are they going to bet an ace high flop if they have an ace? Or are they going to bet an ace high flop when they don't have an ace because they're just hoping I fold if I don't have an ace, right? So those are the types of things that you're trying to, use that information to identify what type of hand they have. If you have history with that opponent and you find that they like to check when they hit it and bet when they don't, then you can use that information to say, okay, this guy probably doesn't have an ace because he's betting it. Or this guy probably has an ace or some sort of showdown value because he checked it to me. He doesn't want to get blown off his hand, or he's hoping I'm going to bluff. So those types of things you can use. In a more detailed scenario, when you're the raiser and an ace high board comes and you bet and they call, you're going to have a much more specific idea of their hand range. Because if they're calling a bet when you bet on an ace high flop, they're usually going to have an ace or some sort of draw or maybe a set. So you want to use all the information that you can to figure out what type of hand that they have, and hopefully be able to say, okay, this person has this hand, like you see on TV where Phil Ivey says, well, I know he had a set. Okay, how did he get to that point? Well, because he bet an ace high flop and they called, and then it was a brick on the turn, he bet again and they raised. What else could they have? If that card didn't improve them, they probably have two pair or they have a set. Why else would they be raising unless they're just on some crazy bluff?
So for fun, when you said the situation is the player, +1 under the gun,
Right.
raises, and you call with the eights, flop comes out ace high, what percentage do you give that continuation bet or C bet,
Right.
is just going to happen whether they have it or don't have
See,
it?
well, that-
because
that
they try
goes
to
back-
represent that ace
Yeah.
very often. It seems
Right.
like in my head I'm thinking, wow, they're going to bet there a lot.
Right. So when we were talking about betting patterns in the previous statement, in the previous segment, if someone's c-betting all the time, well, then you don't give them much credit for that. If it's someone that only c-bets, half the time, then you try to figure out when they're c-betting, when they're not c-betting, on what type of flop texture.